sorunuz var mı? Tamam, o zaman bugünkü oturumu kapatmak istiyorum.
Totality, and we have two speakers. We will have a break in between. Our first speaker is Professor Angelica Nuzzo. She is from the City University of New York, Department of Philosophy. She's the author of many articles and the book called Kant and the Unity of Reason per the University Press. And the title of her paper is Truth and Refutation in Hegel's Begriffslogic. İlk konuğumuz bugün Angelica Nuzzo, Profesör Angelica Nuzzo. Kendisi New York Üniversitesi'nde profesör. Birçok makalenin yanı sıra Kant ve Aklın Birliği ya da Unity of Reason kitabında yazarı. Kendisinin konuşmasının başlığı Hegel'in kavram mantığında gerçeklik ve çözüm.
Thank you for having me here. In defining transcendental logic in relation to traditional logic, Kant discusses Pilatus' question, what is truth? Unlike general logic, concerned only with the formal truth of thinking in abstraction from all content, transcendental logic is concerned with the truth of thinking in relation to a determinate content. Pilatus' question is reproposed by Hegel in the introduction to the logic of the concept. In the introduction, the general introduction to the logic, Hegel embraces Kant's claim that the task of this discipline is not the exposition of abstract forms of thinking, but the introduction of content in the logical form. Thereby, Hegel's dialectical speculative logic is placed in the aftermath of Kant's transcendental logic. It is its true aufhebung. Opening the logic of the concept, however, Hegel makes a programmatic claim more specific. The aim is, I quote, to set the logical form in motion and to show its internal movement or the process through which logical form, in acquiring adequate reality, becomes the logical form of truth. If Hegel's logic of the concept inherits its determinations from general logic, its peculiar character consists in setting the dead bones, as he says, of logic into living motion, showing their inner life and their specific cognitive validity. Speculative conceptual truth is defined by this new framework. It is content-based, concrete truth, and is dynamically referred to the living historical process in and by which it is produced. In raising the problem of truth in the Begriffslogik, Hegel refers to Spinoza. The concept as paradigm of speculative truth and freedom results from the Widerlegung of Spinozism. In refuting Spinozism, the concept overcomes the logic of substance and its necessity and leads on to subjectivity and freedom. The aim of this paper is to clarify the meaning of the process of Widerlegung for the attainment of speculative truth in the grid. What is logical refutation, and how does it establish the truth of what follows, or what follows as the truth of what proceeds by refuting it? What is the peculiar character of the truth thereby instituted? I address the issue of refutation in the Begriffslogik in an indirect way. First, I discuss the passage of the phenomenology in which Hegel rejects a view that opposes truth to the false by holding fast to their fixed opposition. Here I highlight one explicit source of Hegel's view of truth. This discussion sets a context for the problem of truth addressed in the Begriffslogik, topic of the second part of the paper. So I come to the first part, false conceptions of truth. At the heart of Lessing's 1779 Naven der Weise is Pilatus' question, what is truth? At stake is the issue of what is a true way to inquire about truth. It emerges as an unexpected turn in Nathan's encounter with Saladin. Nathan expects money to be the issue, but he receives a different request. Saladin asks him bluntly which of the three religions, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, is the true one. For of these religions, only one can be the true one. This was Lessing. The question perplexes Nathan, and not only because of what it but first and foremost for how it asks. In the monologue that follows, Nathan raises the problem of truth, and here I'm not going to read the passage that you should have as a handout, the first passage. Nathan rejects the numismatic conception of truth, truth as coin. To treat truth as coin and to ask for truth is to ask the wrong question concerning truth. It is even to deceive, to set up a trap to wisdom in the name of truth. To the extent that a coin is both a proposition bearing an inscription, the coin is a sort of numismatic epigram, this is Lessing's own definition, and a material thing, it may seem apt to illustrate the correspondence theory of truth as relationship between proposition and thing. Old coins carry their value in the objective materiality of their weight and in the purity of their metal. Here proposition and thing correspond. New coins instead are abstract exchange devices whose value is independent of the materiality of the coin thing and is created by the inscription of the issuing authority. In this case, no reference to the materiality of the coin is made. Value is created by the arbitrary and abstract act of the minting authority. In Lessing's view, while the coin as such is altogether a false token of truth as correspondence, new coins falsify such conception even more radically than old ones. Nathan's proof that truth cannot be considered coin, hence that the Sultan's question is a wrong question about truth, a false, a morally flawed, and a politically dangerous question, is contained in the famous parable of the three rings. Common to Saladin's inquiry regarding the true religion on the assumption that only one can be the true religion, and to the issue raised by the parable regarding the authenticity of the three rings, on the assumption that only one can be the authentic ring, is the fact that the question cannot be answered when truth is treated as a coin. Since in both cases, truth cannot be theoretically and objectively distinguished from falsity, the impossibility of the answer betrays the inconsistency of the question. Nathan's choice of replying to Saladin, not directly with a positive claim formulated in the terms dictated by his question, but indirectly by way of an enigmatic parable, already entails his rejection of the truth-money equivalence and the proposal of a different, non-economic and static, but moral and developmental idea of truth. Nathan refuses to deliver truth as a ready-made coin that could be cashed out and exchanged in a monetary transaction. He offers his argument in the form of a complex story whose hidden meaning comes to light only progressively as the result of a historical and experiential development. What does Lessing's rejection of the numismatics of truth imply with regard to the nature of truth? First, as far as its origin is concerned, truth does not depend on the arbitrary power of the issuing authority. From this it follows that truth has no right to exercise a kind of tyranny, as Lessing says, that one dominating currency or religion pretends over the others. Moreover, truth does not come already made and ready for exchange as coins do. Truth is constituted through a process of development in which only that which, or the one who, succeeds in proving itself true through action can claim to be true. Second, with regard to its acquisition, truth is not as easily accessible as a new coin is from an immediate look at its inscription, but also not as the old coin is by its being weighted up in relation to an established touchstone. In addition, truth cannot be possessed or accumulated as money. Truth does not fill the mind as coins fill a sack of gold. Third, with regard to its ontological status, truth is neither a thing which can be possessed, exchanged, and alienated at will, nor a property of things. Truth is a quality of actions belonging to specific acting subjects and characterizing historical processes. Thus, assuming that truth is indeed unique, its uniqueness is not exclusive, but fundamentally inclusive and constitutively pluralistic. It is not tyrannical in its repression of difference, but tolerant of difference. Ultimately, for Lessing, truth is not coined, but he says, is freie Liebe, love free of prejudice, virtuous action that follows from a love free of prejudice that is ultimately from Vernunft. Truth is freedom. It is action guided by reason as unification of Begriff and Tat. The uniqueness of truth consists of its essential plurality and universality. Faith is plural in the three religions. Maternal love and active morality is plural in the straven that animates the son's deeds. Finally, truth is not formal and abstract as coins are, being universal means of exchange. Truth has a universality and is a universality of a validated history. It is immediately one with its conceptual content. In the second part of this paper, I suggest that Nathan's rings parable, moving from the numismatic of truth to the idea of truth as freie Liebe, enforced and realized by reason, contains a conceptual shift analogous to the one that guides Hegel in the transition from the logic of the essence to the logic of the concept, from the order of necessity to the realm of freedom, and indeed, the freie Liebe that Hegel says characterizes the Begriff as speculative truth. But let us turn now first to a famous passage of the Phenomenology. In the preface to the Phenomenology, Hegel confronts the views that proposing truth or the absolute as inception of philosophy see any negative preparation to science as useless, if not utterly wrong. Such is a position brought forth by Schellig's pistol shot, namely by the immediacy of an intellectual intuition for which all development out of the absolute is sacrificed to the effortless possession of truth. But it is also the position of the logic of the understanding that claims an unchangeable truth maintained pure falsity because set apart from it. At stake for Hegel is the proposal of a form of thinking that is fundamentally discursive and dynamic. Hegel formulates the task as that of, I quote, bringing fluidity to fixed thoughts, or alternative as that of, again, quote, realizing and spiritualizing the universal by overcoming fixed thoughts. Significantly, these programmatic points are identical with a movement that transforms pure thoughts into logical concepts. But how can thought be rendered fluid, the universal realized and the concept attained? Hegel claims that thinking is set in movement when, I quote, the pure consciousness of itself makes abstraction from itself. Namely, when pure thinking yields to the power of the negative, and instead of persisting in the central position that Kant more recently conferred to it, consents to becoming a moment of a more comprehensive process. Once this change of perspective has taken effect, it becomes clear that truth belongs to the larger overall process, the famous whole, that each partial moment owes its truth to the whole of which it is part, and that each partial moment taken in its isolation is simply false. For the pure consciousness of itself to make abstraction for itself means that it must abandon the fixity of its self-conquered autarkic position. To negate the fixation in which thinking stakes its own unmoved centrality and ultimately its pretended truth implies a twofold move. First, thinking must abandon its fixation in relation to a manifold content which it distinguishes from itself. Second, it must abandon the fixity of the very act of distinguishing such a content from itself, the act that sanctions the alleged unmoved Unbedingtheit of the I to which such content is then referred. If